After the failure of the confession, I became Li Zhixing's deskmate in high school. I told him that I was reborn, and knew a lot about the future. Li Zhixing obviously didn't believe it. I brought him to me who was still in primary school. "Nua, this is your future wife." The teenager's ears were red, and he gritted his teeth and said, "It's a lie, I have someone I like." 1. The light at the corner of the alley is very dim. I can still find Li Zhixing's appearance from the youthful facial features. I never thought that Li Zhixing, who has always been emotionally stable and gentle and cold, was actually a gangster in high school. The teenager looked at me with gloomy and indifferent eyes, as if he would hit my fist in the face in the next second. I followed him silently, watch him lean against the wall, and skillfully take out a cigarette from his pocket. Smoke, light a fire, spit out a smoke ring, and do it in one breath. I frowned slightly. In my impression, Li Zhixing never smoked, drank or hit people. He doesn't have all the bad behaviors of adult men. But at the age of 18, he is the exact opposite. The young Li Zhixing glared at me. "Why are you following me?" His tone was very fierce, and he didn't change his attitude towards me just because I was a girl. I walked to him and pulled out the cigarette that had just been lit in his mouth. "No, throw it out, and throw it into the trash can." Li Zhixing looked at me with an expressionless face, but did not say anything. He touched his pocket, and wanted to take out a cigarette, but I stopped him. Li Zhixing is puzzled. His reputation is not very good. A good girl like me should be afraid of him. Moreover, just now, I also witnessed him smashing his fist into a person's face fiercely. For a moment, the man's nosebleed kept flowing. Until now, there are still dried blood on his hands. I explained, "Smoking is not good for your health. Do your own business." He left this sentence, and got up to leave. I grabbed him. Li Zhixing's face became more and more impatient. "What else do you want to do?" I pointed to the corner of his forehead. "It's bleeding." He subconsciously touched it, but was stopped by me again. "It will be infected." He hugged his chest and looked at me condescendingly. "So?" I smiled at him. "So we should go to the hospital to bandage. Let's go, life-saving benefactor." 2. The time I traveled is very bad. Before coming, Li Zhixing and I confessed. But he rejected it. After coming through, I was standing in the alley, and confronting a stray dog that looked fierce. I take a step back, and the dog goes one step further. I tried to discuss with it. "Let me go. I'll buy you bones to eat." Unfortunately, the negotiation failed. It stared at me with grimaces, roared in its throat, bent down, and was ready to go. I was stiff all over and didn't dare to move. I'm afraid of dogs. I've been bitten by dogs. As a result, I couldn't help but be scared when I saw the dog approaching. Encounter the most feared thing in the saddest time. No one in the world is more unlucky than me. Just when I was in a dilemma, a stone flew from the corner of the alley and crashed into the stray dog. The stray dog was so scared that it retreated repeatedly. I was very relieved and looked back at my benefactor, but I saw the dark version of Li Zhixing, a teenager, and also witnessed his 1 to 3 feet. Li Zhixing is reluctant, but he can't stand it. It's really annoying for me. In the end, he followed me to find a small clinic to bandage. I grimaced and watched the disinfected iodine fall on Li Zhixing's wound. I feel sorry for him. Li Zhixing was completely unconscious, and looked at me with an expressionless face. "It's not that you hurt. What's your expression for?" "I'll hurt you." He rolled his eyes and muttered, "Meddle in your own business." The young Li Zhixing is obviously very unpleasant, and has a unique rebellion of this age. I couldn't help sighing in my heart, but I met him now. I will never like him. 3. I was 22 years old before I came here, and had just graduated from college. And now Li Zhixing in front of me has just come of age. I look at him like a child who can't understand things. Naturally, he put out the attitude of educating children. "I'm repaying you, do you understand? Little brat." Li Zhixing sneered. "My little brat? How much older are you than me?" At the same table, I was stunned. Only then did I know that I had become the deskmate of the young Li Zhixing. A strange girl. On the glass of the clinic, a short-haired and slightly fat girl was standing in place, until Li Zhixing patted me on the shoulder. "Let's go, old aunt." I frowned. It was really impolite. That Li Zhixing didn't want to wait for me at all. He was tall and long-legged, and he had already walked a long way. I trotted to keep up with him. He said in disgust, "Auntie, what do you want to do?" "I have no memory of this body. I don't know what my name is and where I live. And in this era, I was probably still in primary school, so I couldn't take me in. The only person who knows this body is the little brat Li Zhixing. But I don't know how to ask him. I can't tell him that I have lost my memory and don't know who I am. Do I? Don't say that Li Zhixing doesn't believe it. I don't believe it." So after thinking for a long time, I told him seriously, "In fact, I am reborn and know a lot about the future." 4. Li Zhixing looked at me with a stupid expression. "Guantong, if you are sick, go for treatment." The brat is really unpleasant. I held back the urge to roll my eyes, follow him and continue to output. "I didn't lie to you. I'm really a reborn. I came from 10 years later. 10 years later, you will be very rich, and have a very lovely wife." He stopped, and I almost bumped into him. Well, and then what? When I saw that he listened to me obediently, was very happy. I was busy thinking about what his future would be, what career, what kind of college graduation, and when he would buy a house. By the way, bring private goods. Tell him that he will have a wife who is 6 years younger than him in the future. That is me. He listened quietly, and then continued to speed up his pace. I trotted to keep up with him. Li Zhixing, are you listening to me? He ignored me. I really didn't lie to you. I was really reborn from the future. He continued to be silent and walked forward. Really, Li Zhixing, you look into my eyes, I don't. He finally stopped and glared at me with his arms, that I was out of breath, and couldn't say a word. I really, Auntie, I believe you are a reborn. But I'm home, so you don't have to see me off. Only then did I realize that I followed Li Zhi to an old community. There have been a lot of changes in the past 10 years. This place is much worse than what I remember. I don't know where it is at all. Li Zhixing opened the anti-theft iron door, and locked me outside the door. 5. I shouted to him angrily, Li Zhixing. He opened the door with an expressionless face. You still don't believe me, do you? I'm telling the truth, except for the part about me as his wife. But I did pick it up by Li Zhixing, and he did raise me for 6 years. However, when I finally summoned up the courage to confess to him, he refused. The older Li Zhixing was stunned for a moment. Look at my eyes gently and affectionately. It's like looking at others through me. I even doubted whether he raised me, because I was like his white moonlight. But it's a pity that there is no bloody stand-in plot. Li Zhixing rubbed his eyebrows and returned to his usual gentleness. Don't make trouble, little brat. Yes, in his eyes I am a brat. And have 22. Wait for a lamp 9 times 10 to the power of 121 inch in my eyes of the soul. Now Li Zhixing is also a brat. Children of this age should be very old in the 2nd year of middle school. But Li Zhixing always looked at me like a fool. Go out and turn right. I'm confused. He said, look at your brain, and left without looking back. I was left outside the community by him and looked around blankly. It was already dark, and only 2 dimly lit street lamps were barely supported. When I was thinking about whether to brazenly find myself in elementary school to borrow, an anxious middle-aged woman appeared. 6. When she saw me, she asked me anxiously where I had gone. I didn't dare to be sure of her identity and didn't say anything. I let her look all over me. Suddenly, she raised her palm and slapped me. Speak. Are you dumb? Where did you go? Why don't you come back now? She was so strong that my arm was hurt by her, and I couldn't help but shed tears in my eyes. I also guessed her identity. Mom. The woman stopped and frowned to reprimand me. Why are you so hot-tempered now? I ran out after saying a few words to you. Do you know how anxious Mom is? My mother has never worried about me like this. When she left, I pulled her trouser leg, crying and asking her not to leave. Let her take me with her. But she just broke my hand, and let me chase her car, and left without looking back. I met the woman in front of me for the first time, but her reprimand made me feel wronged for the first time in a long time. I hugged her tightly and buried my head in her neck. Tears fell in large pieces, and I cried so much that my nose covered my face. The woman was stunned. She patted my back soothingly, and her voice softened. Well, Mom didn't mean to talk about you. You can't be so stubborn in the future. She wiped my tears and took my hand. Don't cry. I cooked your favorite dish for you, and it's still hot in the pot. Her hands are very rough, but they have the warmth of their mother. 7. I don't know why the real Guantong quarreled with her mother, but the sweet and sour ribs made by my mother are delicious. She watched me finish the meal one by one, and then pushed me back to my room to read, and then she sat down to eat. Guantong's room is not big and warmly decorated. I was lying in bed, and when my head touched the pillow, I felt something was touching me. Only then did I find that a corner of the diary was exposed under the pillow. I didn't mean to spy on her privacy, but put this diary in a more hidden place. Immediately, he opened her textbook. Guantong, Class 2 and 3 of high school. Her handwriting is beautiful, and she takes notes carefully on the book. I don't know why I crossed and became her. I don't know where the real Guantong is, but I have graduated from college and returned to high school. This is no less than a nightmare for me. On the calendar, tomorrow is Monday. I don't even have time to prepare for me. I dare not think about whether I will be at the bottom of the exam, after leaving the textbook for so many years. But time won't allow me to think too much. I feel like I'm going to get up again as soon as I lie down. The alarm clock at 6 o'clock in the morning rang above my head, and it was not completely dawn outside the window. I got up with a strong resentment and fatigue. Then I finished my breakfast in a daze. Find schools and classes according to your memory, as much as possible. It's a pity that I'm still late. I was a whole class late. Li Zhixing was also late. He is still wearing the gauze bandaged in the clinic yesterday on his forehead. I can clearly see that his walking posture is not right, and there are bruises on his wrists. It's clear that he wasn't so seriously injured yesterday. 8. We sat in the corner of the classroom, next to the trash can. This kind of position is mostly the abandoned son of the class. As long as the movement is not large, and does not affect others, the teacher will not care. As soon as he sat down, Li Zhixing fell asleep. I tried to talk to him, but he didn't seem to hear me, probably annoyed by me. Li Zhixing turned his head and looked at me coldly. I handed him a note. Why is your injury worse? He took it angrily, wrote a few words and threw it back to me. The note says don't bother me. Li Zhixing and I have lived together for 6 years. I have hardly seen him lose his temper. His mood is terribly stable. I was picked up by Li Zhixing. My parents divorced, and I followed my father. He soon had a new family and new children. And I was like a doll with ashes, left in the corner by him. He regarded the last broken marriage as a shame, and I was the product of failure. Whether I'm good or bad, he won't look at me more. My stepmother didn't deliberately target me, just regard me as an annoying outsider. Finally, after my brother accidentally burned his hand, everyone forgot about me. I had no money and no keys. I waited at the door all night. At that time, I was lucky and thought they would come back soon. Until firmly after a rain, cold and hungry, I began my wandering life. It was at this time that Li Zhixing took me home, like an adopted small animal. 9. It is a bold thing to follow a strange man home, but I have no choice. Fortunately, Li Zhixing is a good person. He is gentle and patient. I got sick because of the rain. He took me to the hospital to see a doctor. When my throat hurt and I couldn't eat, he helped me make soup with his own hands. When I was hospitalized, I had to drip and take medicine every day. He remembered the time when I took the medicine, and would stare at the drip carefully, for fear that it would be too late to change the potion. As a teenager, he is extremely impatient, being rejected all the time. The mudman also has a 3-part temper, but he is Li Zhixing, and I can't ignore him. So I persevered, and handed over the note again. He didn't even look at it. He pulled it into a ball of paper, and threw it into the trash can. He refused to communicate with me. Maybe we were too quiet, and the teacher's frequent eyes warned. Finally, he couldn't stand it, and clicked Li Zhixing's name. Li Zhixing, you don't want to learn it yourself. Don't influence others. The classroom was quiet for a moment, and everyone's eyes fell on us. I lowered my head slugly, and I got him tired. Li Zhixing was not affected at all, just lying lazily on the table. Until the end of class, I wanted to talk to him again. But I felt that the students around me openly despised me, and whispered that I heard them say that he was the son of a murderer. I was about to pull his hand and froze in place. Li Zhixing's expression was faint, with disdain in his eyes, as if to say, look, I know that you are also such a person. Malice in student days is the most straightforward and hurtful. There is no adult's twists and turns, and he hasn't learned to be smooth. They talked in a low voice, with undisguised contempt in their eyes. It was a sharp knife. It's enough to make the people in it bruised all over. Adults may not be able to bear it, let alone teenagers who are mentally immature. 10. Li Zhixing has never described his past to me. When I met him, he was the mature and reliable one. I don't know how he became later, but I seem to know the meaning of my coming here. I will help him just like he helped me. So, I entangled him. After school, I followed him step by step. Li Zhixing ignored me, and just quickened his pace to get rid of me. It's a pity that his leg was injured, and he couldn't get rid of me. Finally he stopped. Don't you know? I am the son of a murderer. Don't follow me. His tone was cold, and the corners of his mouth evoked a mocking smile. I just looked at him and said, it's not you who makes mistakes. Li Zhixing was slightly stunned, and then said in a bad tone, if you have a father, you must have a son. How do you know that I won't kill? I won't be a murderer in the future. I approached him and said, you won't. As I said, I'm from the future. I know what kind of person you are in the future. He sneered and said, don't fool people with your rhetoric. Guantong, go home early. We are not the same people. The teenager thought that he could push everything back by erecting thorns, that Li Zhixing refused to communicate with me at school. After all, he is the son of a murderer, and I, who come into contact with him, will also be involved in gossip. He can't express himself. He just wants to use a bad attitude to make me know the difficulty and retreat. The glow of the setting sun spread on him, and I couldn't see his expression against the light. Just tell him solemnly, Li Zhixing, whether you believe it or not, I did travel from the future. I'm here for you. 11. Li Zhixing didn't say anything. I don't know what he is thinking, trying to get closer to him. He stepped back subconsciously. Li Zhixing, you will be a good person in the future, of course. And you are still the same. After all, you are my benefactor. Without you, I may be bitten by a dog again. The teenager's expression was slightly moved, and he still pressed his lips tightly and said nothing. I patted his arm. So benefactor, go. Li Zhixing was slightly stunned. Where are you going? Deal with the wounds on your body. I pointed to his leg. He subconsciously refused, and I threatened him. If you don't go, I'll follow you all the time. I'll annoy you. Maybe it's really hard for him to bear, but he's still compromised. The sunset pulls our shadows very long. The teenager is very tall and thin, and I just reached his shoulder position. One is tall and one is short. One is fat and the other is thin. We walked side by side and no one spoke. It's early spring, and there is still the fragrance of grass in the air. It's still the clinic, the doctor. The difference is that Li Zhixing was not impatient this time. When I grised again to help him hurt, he actually smiled. I asked him what he was laughing at, and he regained his usual disgusted look. Smile if you want a little brat, and pretend to be deep. Li Zhixing replied to me. Old aunt, your childlike heart has not worn out. My psychological age is already 22, but Guantong is only 18. I couldn't help reaching out and patting his head. Can't you be polite? If you are like this, who will like you in the future? Li Zhixing was silent again. After a long time, we left the clinic before he opened his mouth. The voice is very soft, and the loneliness can't be concealed. He said, no one will like me. 12. I looked at him and disapprovingly. How could it be? There are many people who like you, and many girls confess to you. You are lucky. After thinking about it, I added another sentence. But you only like your wife. Li Zhixing shook his head and smiled. It's true. People like me should be rotten in the mud. When he said this, I seemed to see 28-year-old Li Zhixing through time, gentle and cold, with a sense of loneliness that belongs to him. My heart seems to be pulled hard by a hand, sour and astringent. Li Zhixing, you deserve the best. You are really a very good person. I don't know if what I do now will have an impact on the future, but I don't want to see him constantly deny himself. In a hurry, I grabbed his arm and wanted him to believe me, but a harsh voice came from behind. TSK, isn't this a potential murderer? Who is the little fat girl beside him? It can't be his girlfriend, right? Ha ha ha. I turned my head to look, and found that those people were the two of Li Zhixing's first pick. Their words are mean, their eyes are vulgar, and they keep turning around us. People like him can only find this kind of person. Of course, who can a normal girl like him? That's right, ha 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 ha. Li Zhixing's eyes were gloomy, and his fists were clenched. I hurriedly pulled him behind, looked at the two people, and asked politely, which page of the Shanhaijing did you climb down? 13. The two people were stunned, and I looked at them up and down. The two people were wearing a rated denim jacket, and one of them was also wearing glasses. Looking at the human model like a dog, one mouth exposed their race. Life is tasteless, and the toad comments on human beings. I said it bluntly, and they could easily understand it, and it was obvious that their eyes were red with anger. Damn it, say it again. The little glasses exploded at one time, rushed to me, and raised his fist to greet me in the face. But he was stopped by Li Zhixing. He stood in front of me, and looked at the two people quietly with his chest in his arms. He is tall, and the two boys are half a head shorter than him, and his momentum is obviously lacking. Unconsciously take 2 steps back. After all, they have seen the fierceness of Li Zhixing's fight for a long time, that I don't want to let them go. Standing behind Li Zhixing, he said, Yo, bully the soft and fear the hard. I thought it was awesome, but it turned out that the teapot fell off, and only one mouth was left. Their faces turned red with anger. If it hadn't been for Li Zhixing, he would have rushed up and beat me. I can only say harshly to me, don't let us see you again. My eyes are about to turn over. Then poke your own eyes. Little glasses want to say something more. The one next to him is obviously more insightful. Looking at Li Zhixing's difficult appearance, he pulled him away. I watched them curse and leave. When I turned my head, I found that Li Zhixing was staring at me closely. His eyes were full of sexaminy, and soon he returned to normal. I pretended not to see it, and complained to him. You didn't have any energy last time. Those two people should have beaten them fiercely, so that they didn't dare to be cheap again. Li Zhixing sneered in a mocking tone. Is that so? I thought you were scared. Well, I was really scared to see Li Zhixing fighting, but I was more shocked. 14. However, I also found something strange. In school, students will also sneer at Li Zhixing, but he all ignores them. Why did those two people make Li Zhixing impulsive? I thought so and asked. Li Zhixing was silent for a while before slowly opening his mouth. They should be beaten. Those 3 people are very annoying. Like many adolescent boys, they point at girls with vulgar jokes. Li Zhixing beat them, just because their joke was aimed at a strange little girl. They discussed the little girl's undeveloped breasts, and the bottoms under the training suit. Unfortunately, Li Zhixing was right behind them, with all their dirty eyes and disgusting words in his heart, that he specially found an alley without surveillance to educate the 3 beasts severely. But I didn't expect to meet me who confronted the dog. After listening to it, I felt guilty. At first, I regarded him as a fighting gangster and condemned him in my heart. Why did Li Zhixing, who was so light and moon, look so unbearable? It turned out that I was narrow-minded. He was originally a good person, but he didn't suddenly become like that. I apologized to him, and he looked at me inexplicably. What's wrong with this? What's more, isn't it well known that I have poor grades and don't like to study? I shook my head. He was very smart, and the university he went to was also a very good university. I tried hard for a long time to keep up with him. I don't know what he experienced later, and his personality changed greatly. I don't know if the future will change because of me, but I hope his future road will be smoother and smoother. I want to do my best to help him. Maybe there is more than one way to learn in the world, but it is a shortcut that can accommodate ordinary people and give you more choices. So Mr. Li, do you want me to tutor you? 15. Li Zhixing looked complicated and distrustful. Are you tutoring me? His doubts are not concealed, which makes me very dissatisfied. Although I forgot a little about the high school textbook, I was also admitted to his university with a high score. Guantong, I appreciate your kindness. Yes, he still thinks I'm talking nonsense. Be skeptical about my identity as a reborn. After all, the real Guantong's grades are not very good. Otherwise, he would not be exiled next to the trash can with Li Zhixing. Li Zhixing is gentle and easygoing on the surface, but what he determines is generally not easy to change. Just like now, he says to believe me, but in fact he always thinks I'm insurrepsi. I can't force him to believe, so I can only follow his ideas. I'm Guantong, but I'm a little sick in the second year of middle school. Well, Mr. Li, would you like to help each other and learn together with me? Li Zhixing's expression was disgusted, and he quickened his pace to distance his distance from me. I pestered him all the way. He was really bothered by me, but he still agreed. But before we separated, he made an appointment with me for 3 chapters. First, don't say those words that embarrass me. I nodded and agreed. Those words not only embarrassed him, but also embarrassed me. Second, talk less and don't be noisy. It's a little difficult, but I can barely restrain myself. Third, don't keep pestering me. I shook my head and said, no. Li Zhixing closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Guantong, it's not good for you to approach me. Although the teenager Li Zhixing is not so likable, he respects girls and has a sense of justice. The most important thing is that he is Li Zhixing, and I like him. I looked at him stubbornly. It's up to me whether it's good or not. If you are afraid of gossip, I'm sorry. I'm deaf and I can't hear. Li Zhixing looked at me quietly for a long time, and compromised in silence. He sent me downstairs and watched me go upstairs. I stood on the balcony, and waved goodbye to him. He turned his head and left, walked a few steps and waved to me as well. The young Li Zhixing is awkward and cute. 16 Li Zhixing did what he said. I didn't sleep on the table in class the next day. No matter how boring and sleepy the teacher said, he tried to listen carefully. After class, I also sat quietly in my seat, and looked at the questions that the teacher said in class. That I'm very pleased about this. It's a good start. I started to get inch by inch. Let him be polite and civilized. Li Zhixing was impatient at first, but he couldn't help me from following him. More and more 28-year-old Li Zhixing looks like. Now he behaves much more gently, and the gloom between his eyebrows has also faded. He also has the vitality of this age. He is originally good-looking, with long legs and delicate eyebrows. It is more green than the appearance in my memory, but with the spirit of a teenager. Walking on the road, there will even be little girls blushing and asking him for his contact information. Li Zhixing refused indifferently at first, which made the little girl's eyes red. I shook my head at him. You can't make the little girl sad like this. He held his arms and looked at me coldly. Then I don't like her. Doesn't delaying her make her sadder? I'm speechless. I can only tell him, be gentle. So when he met the confession again, he told people with a smile. No, I have a partner. I looked at him in surprise. When did it happen? Why don't I know? Li Zhixing looked at me with a smile. Didn't you keep telling me that my future wife is 6 years younger than me, and is in primary school? 17. I have always felt a little guilty about this matter. After all, I confessed to him before I came, and he also rejected me. I deliberately diverted the topic. Your foundation is too poor. I've sorted out a note for you. Take a look first. He stuffed the notes into his hand and ran away. That note was made by me for many times. The learning methods in it have been experimented by me personally, and some of them were taught to me by Li Zhixing himself. This is also taken from the people and used for the people. His foundation is so poor that 2 years of high school is equivalent to not studying. If you don't find the right way, it's completely impossible to build cars behind closed doors. When I got home, it was already dark, and the light in the living room is always on. As soon as I entered the door, my mother brought me a glass of hot milk to drink. I dress as Guantong these days. Guan's mother has always been very good to me, and I am also very happy to be close to her. Even if I'm not the real Guantong, I'm not her daughter. I am greedy for this long-lost maternal love, even though I know it doesn't belong to me. She watched me drink the milk happily, touched my ponytail and sighed. Tong Tong is much better than before. In the past, I asked you to tie your hair up and didn't listen to you. Now it's good. How nice it is for the little girl to be Liliso. I'm not used to having short hair, so I tie it with a leather strap after it grows. Her words are praising me, but my heart was sour when I heard it. Mom, do you think I used to be terrible? These days as Guantong, I haven't read her diary and live in my own way. Guantong and I are 2 completely different people. It's ridiculous to cross into another person. My mother will only think that my temperament has changed a lot. She kept talking that my goodness now belittles me in the past, but she won't know that what she keeps demeaning is her real daughter. I looked at her. I knew what she was going to say, so I interrupted her. Mom, I'm going to study. I don't know where the real Guantong is. I occupied her body. Many times, I could feel her emotions when I got along with my mother. Heartache, aggrieved low self-esteem. 18 Li Zhixing didn't come to school. These days, it has become a habit for me to study with him. When he is not here, I always feel a little uneasy. After a day, I can't keep my soul. After finishing school, I rushed to his house impatiently. It's still an old residential building with rusty stairs. The door of his house was open. I stood at the door and knocked on the door, but no one responded. I shouted inside, "Is anyone there?" As soon as the words fell, a wine bottle flew towards the door. It fell at my feet and broke all over the ground. A burly middle-aged man came out cursingly. "What's the name of the ghost?" The man's beard is shaggy, sloppy, and his expression is fierce. I was too scared to speak and stood still in a daze. He is Li Zhixing's father, a murderer who has just been released from prison. Just when I was at a loss, Li Zhixing pulled me behind me. He said lightly to the man, "Find me." After saying that, regardless of the man's reaction, he pulled me around and left. His legs are not very sharp, but he is very anxious. It was not until we walked out of the community that he let go of the hand that had been holding me. The tone was irritable. "What are you doing here? We made an appointment to study together." He subconsciously took out a cigarette in his pocket and was stopped by me. "Didn't you see it all?" When we left, Li Zhixing's father was still cursing behind him and calling him a bitch. Think of the wound on his body. I soon understood what kind of situation Li Zhixing is in now. The unhealthy family and the violent and alcoholic father made his road dark. No matter how hard he tried to climb up, the terrible original family was like a swamp, pulling him into the abyss fiercely. 19 I sat quietly next to him and watched the traffic pass by. The harm brought by the original family is like a bone-attached leprosy, which is faintly painful every night. After my father remarried, I became an invisible person in the new family. Young children always do some stupid things in order to attract the attention of adults. I began to rebel deliberately, didn't study hard, and left out the dance I had learned since I was a child. But none of these can be exchanged for half of his eyes. Finally, when I skipped class again, the teacher couldn't stand it and called my parents. Mom changed the phone card and transferred the call to Dad. Dad said a few words perfunctory and hung up the phone in a hurry. I heard the voice of his stepmother urging him on the other end of the phone. From the beginning to the end, he didn't ask me half a sentence, and he didn't even blame me. I stood in place in a daze. Tears blurred my vision, and my heart was crumpled, sour and astringent. The teacher didn't know what to say when he saw this, and he also saw my loss. Still, hatred does not make steel. She is half comforting and half coaxing. Nansha, adults like good children. As long as you are obedient, they will like you. I believed her and ended my short period of rebellion. Instead, I began to please them. 20 I was like an outsider under a fence, carefully looking at their faces at home. Dad and stepmother have a good relationship. I thought that if he pleased his stepmother, he would love the house and woo, and he would have more thoughts on me. I will take every word my stepmother says to heart, take it as a big deal, and do it carefully and carefully. He occasionally shows me a good face, and praises me for being sensible. After the birth of my younger brother, I regard him as my top priority. I can see that he loves his younger brother very much. I still remember that it was the end of the semester, when the summer vacation was approaching. I came back late that day. The stepmother leaned on the sofa and watched TV, and the younger brother, who was learning to reach the cup on the table. The skin of the whole hand was burned. The stepmother called the father, and the two hurriedly sent their younger brother to the hospital. They stayed up all night with their brother in the hospital, and completely forgot about me. So I began to wander, and was taken in by Li Zhixing. But in fact, I didn't want to at first. I'll go back for a trip. I heard my stepmother and father complain that I was not familiar with it. My brother was injured, and I didn't know where I had gone. She said that if I hadn't come back late, and didn't take care of my brother wouldn't have been hurt. I don't understand the causal relationship between the two, but I know it's not my fault. Dad didn't say anything, and I was vaguely looking forward to it. I expect him to refute for me. He didn't. He acquiesced to his stepmother's words. He said, "Don't worry about me. I should run to find my mother. It's good without me. At least I won't get in the way in front of their family of 3. It was not until that moment that I completely died. It turns out that I'm really a child that no one wants. 21 The abandonment of my parents makes me feel particularly inferior, that I think I must be the worst child in the world. Otherwise, why don't even my biological parents want me? When I encounter beautiful things, I always subconsciously stay away from them, and feel that I don't deserve them. It took Li Zhixing a long time to get me out. He celebrated my birthday, listened to me carefully, and valued my every appeal. He will tell me gently when I am not confident. I deserve it. I deserve the best thing in the world. Now Li Zhixing is just like me at the beginning, constantly denying himself. Li Zhixing, do you know that when I was about to stand it, someone said to me, "In this world, everyone is walking on a road. It's very dark ahead. I don't know what danger there will be. There will be many people along the way. No one will always accompany anyone. In the end, the only one who can walk that road is himself." She said that I must not give up on myself and keep going. I'm here for you, but I won't be with you all the time. Therefore, please be sure to stick to it. Take the road you want to go and think is right. Take the way I want to go. Li Zhixing repeated my words. His tone was confused, and his eyelashes trembled slightly. Can I? You will definitely. I looked at him in a determined tone. Li Zhixing smiled bitterly. It's really easy for you to say. Do you know what kind of rotten person I am? His tone was calm, but with a quiver. Li Zhixing, you are you, your father is your father, and his actions cannot represent you. I killed someone, you know? Guantong, you don't know anything. I'm just a bad person. The corners of his eyes turned red, and he shouted at me, with an uncontrollable cry in his throat. I killed my mother. She died because of me, and he was imprisoned because of me. 22 Li Zhixing talked about his past. He was 5 years old that year. His parents quarreled fiercely, and he hid in the cabinet. The pots and pans were smashed all over the ground. Mom didn't know what she said, which made Dad suddenly rise up. She picked up the fruit knife on the table, and poked it in the heart. The young Li Zhixing hid in the dark and cramped cabinet, and watched his father and mother quarrel through the cracks. And my mother lay on the ground, and never got up again. The reason for the quarrel between the two was just his words. He told his father that his mother asked him to call another uncle Dad. He doesn't understand why he has 2 fathers. The child didn't understand, but as an adult, the father soon understood. His wife cheated on her. Li Zhixing looked up, and a tear slowly flowed down the corner of his eyes. Later, I realized that my mother didn't have to marry him. She is a college student, and has a boyfriend, who has been in love for many years. They promised to get married after graduating from college. However, before she graduated from college, she was bought home by him with a dowry of 500 yuan. She resisted and ran away. Everyone persuaded her to compromise, until she gave birth to me. But her first love found her. He waited for her for many years, and came to take her away. But because of my words, she couldn't leave and lost her life. Tears fell drop by drop. These are all things I never knew. Li Zhixing's past. Later, he was imprisoned, and my grandfather came from the countryside to take care of me. Grandpa is very old, and it's not easy to support me. He sells baked sweet potatoes in a stove every day. Because he killed people, the people around him have a bad attitude towards us. Almost no one dares to buy Grandpa's sweet potatoes. They deliberately teased him, and kicked his stove over, so that he couldn't sell sweet potatoes. When I stopped him, they spit at me, saying that if it weren't for me, my father would not have killed my mother. I was a harmful spirit, a morning star, and anyone who approached me would not have a good end. When Li Zhixing talked about his grandfather, his tone was so choked that he almost cried out. I went to school and knew it was feudal superstition. But they are right. No one who is close to me will not have a good end. 2 days before he was released from prison, his grandfather died, and he didn't see him for the last time. Grandpa had cancer, and he held my hand tightly when he died. Li Zhixing raised his left hand and trembled slightly. He said that when your father comes out, life will be fine. I never thought that Li Zhixing used to be like this. It's like an abyss, sticky, heavy, out of breath, and can't see the light. He regained his composure. I'm just a disaster star, and no one close to me has a good end. Don't waste time on me. I've been rotten for a long time. 23 Li Zhixing, you didn't know this at that time. You can't condemn a 5-year-old child who knows nothing and doesn't understand anything. I handed the tissue to his palm. You have always known that it was not you who killed your mother. He held the paper hard, and the blue veins protruded, but suddenly let go of his hand, letting the tissue fall from his palm. Grandpa's death is not your fault. You are not a disaster star. He was looking forward to your good life before he died. How could he be willing to blame you? My tone was very light. My heart was sour and tears fell together. Young Li Zhixing, he has always known it. How can he not understand? His relatives left one after another, and everyone was condemning him. Finally, when the bittersweet was about to come, his grandfather also left him. He began to question himself. Is it all his fault? Because of him, they will end up like this. No one told him that it was not his fault. Violence penetrated into his life. The father was imprisoned for murder, moral condemnation, and panic made people use verbal violence on the murderer's son. After his father was released from prison, he lived an unsatisfactory life, and was paralyzed by alcohol. After a moment of sobriety, the pain of reality allowed him to exert violence on the only remaining son. And Li Zhixing, who welcomed all this, could only constantly condemn himself from the bottom of his heart. He thought, if he hadn't said that, wouldn't it have happened later? However, Li Zhixing is really a very good person. Even though I have such a hard time, I am still willing to be kind. I couldn't stop my tears. Li Zhixing silently stretched out his hand to wipe my tears. When he was young, he was not as gentle as he was later. He thought that he would push others back, but he easily showed his soft belly. Li Zhixing, please believe me. You will definitely have a good future. After a long time he nodded gently. Okay. I stood up and stretched out my hand to him, and he held it tightly. Under the light, the figure of the teenager coincided with the figure of Li Zhixing who picked me up that year. He has always been him. Li Zhixing doesn't need me to transform. He is a good person himself. After that day, Li Zhixing came to school as usual. He is very serious. His grades gradually improved, and the teacher's attitude towards him was much milder, and he even praised him in class. Although his classmates still occasionally discuss his voice, they are not the identity of his murderer's son. What's more, I was surprised by his transformation. I have been living here for 3 months as Guantong. At first, I could still feel her emotions, but gradually, she seemed to disappear completely. I don't want to occupy her body for the rest of my life. This is her life, and no one can encroach on her. Guantong's family is ordinary, and her parents are also ordinary people. Maybe I'm so eager for family affection that I always subconsciously ignore their contradictory behavior. They said I was fat, but they gave me food to have sex, tell me not to treat myself unfairly, and complain to me that it's not easy to make money, constantly denying the former Guantong, unconsciously belittle and suppressing, but the hot milk at night, peeled eggs in the morning. All kinds of details make me feel the love clearly. My parents' love is too alienated to me. I can't understand the contradictory feeling of slapping a sweet date. I'm not Guantong, and I can't empathetic. The wind blows up the pages, and the willows all over the sky flutter with the wind. Their love is like the spring breeze carrying willows, which is warm and breathless. My mother was playing milk again. When she chatted with me, I interrupted her. Mom, am I the child you like? These days when I became Guantong, I greedily recalled the love my parents gave to my children, and madly wanted to fill my missing family affection with this love that did not belong to me. Guantong and I are two different people. Li Zhixing just didn't believe that I was reborn, but he firmly believed that I was not the original Guantong. Can she recognize it? 25 Mom was stunned, her fingers pinching the glass turned white, and her tone trembled unconsciously. You kid, what nonsense are you talking about? One question after another is written on the occasional note in Guantong's book. Am I the child you like? If your child were not me, would you be happy? Will my existence bother you? One question after another, all asked my mother. I lowered my eyes and asked softly, but Mom, do you really dislike the former me? Stop talking nonsense and go to bed early. Mom put the milk on the table and ran away. She knows it. I spoke to the mirror. She is a mother. How can she not recognize her child? The girl in the mirror is a face that is a little strange to me. Round face, single eyelid, and some pimples on the forehead. It's not beautiful, but the more I look at it, the more kind I feel. Gradually, the face blurred and time became clear. When I was ignored by my father again, I stood on the bridge and prepared to jump. I thought childishly that if I died, he would care about me more. But he was stopped by a passing sister. She is not young and holds me tightly. When I broke down and cried, he gently comforted me. She said, in this world, everyone is walking on a road. It's very dark ahead. I don't know what danger there will be. There will be many people along the way. No one will accompany anyone all the time. In the end, the only one who can walk that road is himself. You must not give up on yourself and keep going. The sister who saved me at the beginning was Guantong. After that day, my mother was careful with me. She looked at me, but she still stubbornly said that if only I had been the same as I am now. 26 in the school, rumors grow from dark corners and slowly permeate. I can feel that the eyes looking at me outside the window are unkind, contemptuous and disliked. Where I appear with Li Zhixing, someone will always whisper and look at us with ambiguous eyes. In the boring high school life, some empty words are exaggerated and retouched, becoming everyone's talk. I was in the toilet, and heard two girls talking about me. They said that I was shameless to hook up with Li Zhixing. He belittled my appearance again, and said that Li Zhixing fell in love with me when he was blind. Leaving aside Li Zhixing's reprimandable identity, his appearance is so superior that it is amazing at first glance. The girls' discussion is quite converged, but they can also hear their jealousy. The world always has a natural hostility towards girls who are not beautiful. Boys' malice is sharper. They will look at me unkindly, sneer disdainfully, and then sneer and say, I don't want it to be reversed to me. Maybe some places are better, you know. They stared at my chest, and stroked my chest with exaggerated gestures. I also looked back. If there is no mirror at home, there is always urine, right? Look at what you are like. Do you usually take selfies on the door to ward off evil spirits? If they can't scold me, I will say, if you have to take the right seat, I can't help it. The mouth is so powerful. No wonder someone wants to be ugly. When Li Zhixing heard such words, he usually raised his fist to beat them. I stopped him. Violence is not the only way. Gagging will only make them feel guilty. They have convicted us in the bottom of their hearts, and they will not believe it no matter how much they explain it. But I want them to know what the disaster comes from the mouth. 27 rumors are rampant. They even said, they saw Li Zhixing accompany me to the small clinic for abortion. In this absurd and thin speech, no one refuted it. They are happy to see other people's unbearable. And what we have to do is to hit them in the face. We found the root of the rumor. It was the little 4 eyes that were beaten by Li Zhixing who deliberately smeared. He made us pay the price, but the methods were extremely disgusting. We stared at him closely, and recorded his smug and disgusting face when he instructed the girl again. Li Zhixing was invited to speak under the flag on Monday, because of his great progress. He played the video of Xiao Xian, and the teacher didn't have time to stop him, and the whole school heard his suspicious words. There was a whisper below, and the boomerang hit him like the attack on Li Zhixing. Li Zhixing stood up straight with a serious tone. I can't care about other people's attacks on me. because what they said is true. There is no denying that I am indeed the son of a murderer. But other students should not be held hostage by unnecessary rumors and point at the girl's appearance. It's very bad. Li Zhixing uncovered his scars with his own hands, just to prevent me from continuing to be involved in rumors. The surrounding noise, his words hit my heart word by word. My heart was beating like a drum, and I could only hear his voice in my ears. The speech was written in advance, and his voice was clear. I stood under the stage and watched him bathe in the sun. Finally he said, "Regard other people's eyes as ghost fire, and walk your night road boldly." 28 Xiao Xian's remarks made many students uncomfortable. He jointly complained and pressured the school to expel him. He has good grades, is in the top 10 in the grade, and is expected to enter a famous school. But good grades do not mean good character. You must become an adult before becoming a talent. The school still expelled him. The speech under the national flag made Li Zhixing famous. What surrounds him is no longer the son of the murderer, but his efforts. Friends began to appear around Li Zhixing. Boys would call him to play ball, and girls would discuss topics with him. I am no longer his only choice. But when the teacher offered to help him adjust his position, he firmly refused. He said that it was good for him to be at the same table with me, and didn't want to change seats. My ears are a little hot, and I dare not look at him. We walked side by side in the corridor of the school, and neither of us spoke to each other. The tiles on the wall reflected the pink-purple sunset. I turned my head to look and met his eyes. The scorching burn was like a general, and he looked away. Li Zhixing took the initiative to break the embarrassment. "Is it true that you said that my future wife is 6 years younger than me?" I didn't expect that he would ask me this. I was stunned for a moment and nodded quickly. "Really, I won't lie to you. You spoil her very much and are very patient with her." I never forget my original intention, and still export the concept that I am his wife to him. Li Zhixing didn't believe it, but he seemed to accept the absurd fact that I was a reborn. I brought him to me in primary school, and pointed to the little girl with a high ponytail. "Here, that's your future wife." 29 Zhou Nanxia in the distance jumped and played with her classmates. Looking at the former self from the perspective of others, I can't tell the complexity in my heart. The little girl is sunny and cheerful, which is completely different from herself in my memory. In memory, Zhou Nanxia was sensitive to low self-esteem. He always walked with his head down, did not refuse people, and subconsciously pleased everyone around him. This look is too far away. Even if I know it's me, I still feel strange that I stared at her, and Zhou Nanxia, who was young, gradually walked away. It was not until she disappeared that I came back to my senses. Li Zhixing sneered. "It's a lie." I didn't refute him. I was the worst me that Li Zhixing met. If Zhou Nanxia always looks like me, will Li Zhixing like me? We were chatting one by one. When we were about to separate, he said, "Next time, I'll cheat people with snacks." I was puzzled. He gritted his teeth and said, "My future wife is still in primary school. Why don't you say that you are my future wife?" Li Zhixing's ears were red, and he didn't look at me awkwardly. When I wanted to ask him again, he walked fast, leaving only his back to me. I was at a loss for words when I stood there. So the teenager Li Zhixing likes me? 30 When I got home, my mother sat in my room blankly. It was not until I knocked on the door that she woke up like a dream. She is holding Guantong's diary in her hand. Her eyes were a little red and she avoided my eyes. "Are you home? Are you hungry? I'll cook for you." There is also a painting in Guantong's diary. It's a little girl dancing in a dance suit. Even a simple sketch can show her bright smile and confidence when dancing. I recognized that the little girl in the painting was the former me. There are words on the back of the painting, which are Guantong's. "Mom, do you like such a child? I thought I was here for Li Zhixing. With Guantong's identity, let the young Li Zhixing treat me as his future wife, and let him accept my confession. When he was young, he was completely different from my impression, and I was even prejudiced against him. Slowly, the more I have contact with him, the more I know about him, the more I feel sorry for him. I came to contact him with the heart of the savior, but found that he was a very good person himself. And in the days of becoming Guantong, the longer the time, the more Lu Su in the air can make it difficult for people to breathe. So, Guantong, do you think they will be happier if they have another child?" I took the painting, and tried to talk to Guantong in my heart. "Thank you, Guantong. Without you, Zhou Nanxia might have died in the river of that year. What you told me to let me firmly go the way I want to go. What about you? Are you really going to give up your own path?" After reading the diary, my mother always deliberately avoids me. She no longer talks to me, but when she looks at me, her eyes are intertwined with various emotions. Occasionally she will say, "You used to be very good at drawing." When she said this, I could feel Guantong's emotions. Like a messy ball of wool, sour, flattered, happy, helpless. 31 Li Zhixing is becoming more and more like when I knew him, and I guide Guantong every day. I hope she can come back early to take over her life. I didn't wait for Guantong's return, but I was blocked in the alley again. Li Zhixing and I were blocked by more than a dozen people, led by the expelled Xiao Xian. He dyed his hair, tattooed, and had a cigarette in his mouth, and mixed with the gangster. He was followed by the same heir as him, and everyone had iron rods in their hands. Xiao Xian held an iron rod and knocked on the wall fiercely, trying to deter me and Li Zhixing. Li Zhixing frowned slightly, and pulled me to leave without squinting. Xiao Xian stopped us, and his eyes were as vulgar as ever. Tisk, are you fucking messing with me just for this woman? The gangsters surrounded us, and Li Zhixing silently protected me behind us. What do you want to do? How about it? Li Zhixing, how dare you ask me? You made me drop out of school, so that other schools dare not accept me. But I am happy and follow this fat man in pairs every day. Li Zhixing looked at him condescendingly. Keep your mouth clean. Xiao Xi's eyes were not verbose, and his stick was pulled at him. Aren't you very good at fighting? Last time 1 pick 3. This time 1 pick 10. Let me see your ability. The iron stick hit Li Zhixing's arm fiercely. I pulled him to dodge, but I saw that he resisted and kicked Xiao Xian's heart. Xiao Xian was suddenly kicked down by him. Li Zhixing reacted very quickly and pulled me to run. We ran for our lives, but there were so many people on the other side that they soon caught up and surrounded us tightly again. Xiao Xian shouted behind and asked them to do it. They waved their iron sticks to greet us. Li Zhixing protected me in his arms and hit me several times. They tried so hard that I heard Li Zhixing humming in pain. I wanted to get out of his arms, but he hugged me tightly and couldn't move. He said, "Don't be afraid." 32 Xiao Xian smiled ferociously at the corners of his mouth, and he raised a stick to hit Li Zhixing's body. Seeing that the stick was held high, he was kicked down from behind. If you don't learn well, stop it. The voice is rough, and it even has the blur after being drunk. It's Li Zhixing's father. The gangsters around us looked at each other, and were at a loss for words at the tall and strong man. Xiao Xian got up from the ground with his waist covered, and glared at Li Zhixing fiercely. What are you afraid of? There are only 3 of them. Are we afraid that they won't succeed with so many of us? Everyone fought, and they didn't care about one more person. They raised the stick and continued. Li's father was an adult and easily kicked down a few gangsters. That Li Zhixing tried to resist while protecting me, watching an iron stick cut through the air, and pumped at me fiercely. He hurriedly blocked me, but saw the stick stopped in the air. Someone shouted outside the crowd, "It's bleeding." We looked at the source of the sound and saw Xiao Xian holding the iron stick blankly, and the stick was still dripping with blood, and Li's father had fallen to the ground, and a large amount of blood overflowed from the back of his brain, dyeing the surrounding land red. He opened his mouth in a daze. I just wanted to stop him, not mean it. Li Zhixing broke free, knelt beside Li's father, and stretched out his hand tremblingly to probe his breath. His hand stayed under his nose for a long time, and did not move again. Li's father's eyes were tightly closed, and his face, which he used to look fierce, now looks old and tired. He seemed to be asleep. The gangsters dispersed in a hurry when they saw the dead people, and there were more and more passers-by watching that. It was not until the police surrounded Li Zhixing that he came back to his senses. He seemed to have just seen the blood in the back of Li's father's head. He stretched out his hand to cover it, but it didn't help. Blood dripped from his hand, and tears flowed all over his face. He searched in the crowd and finally found me. Li Zhixing was like a child who made a mistake. Why can't you block it? 33 Li's father was confirmed dead. The originators are already adults, and will bear the punishment they deserve. Xiao Xian is no exception. Li Zhixing has no other relatives, and he did the burial alone. He is more silent and gloomy and often distracted. I was very worried about him, and followed him almost every step. Li Zhixing just smiled gently at me. Don't worry about me. I'm not a child. Almost overnight, I could no longer see the appearance of the teenager Li Zhixing from him. He became more and more like him later. Gentle and alienated that I pushed open the door, and my mother sat in front of the desk, watching the afterglow of the sunset outside the window, being attacked by the darkness little by little. The room is very dark and there is no light. I sat beside her, and she didn't look back and said to herself, Tong Tong, when you were born, everyone hoped that you were a boy and looked forward to your birth. It was my first time to be a mother, and it was a wonderful feeling. There is a life in my flat stomach. I don't care about your gender. I think it's enough for my child to be healthy and happy. You were born as a girl, and everyone was disappointed. At that time, family planning was tight, and they advised me to send you away, and have a boy again. I hugged you. You were small and soft. I didn't dare to force myself. When you smiled at me, my heart softened. This is my child. My daughter who is related to my blood. I don't want to give it away. I've never been so firm. Because of my stubbornness, your grandparents didn't look good to me before I gave a baby. They will always compare you with boys. I want to fight for a breath. And I want you to fight for a breath. And tell them that girls are no worse than boys. I began to belittle you, and began to compare you with others. I thought this would give you a sense of crisis, and inspire you. Her tone choked. But my mother forgot that at first. She just wanted my child to be healthy and happy. My hand unconsciously put on her hand, and the complicated feeling in my heart surged up again. That belongs to Guantong's emotion. 34 When my mother gave birth to me, did she also expect to make me healthy and happy? For my mother, my memory is too vague. I only remember her determination when she left. When I was a child, I didn't understand and even resented her. But as I grew older, I gradually realized that she had done nothing wrong. She and her father were each other's first love. When I was very young, they had a good relationship. Slowly, they began to quarrel, and the quarrel turned upside down. I've always been afraid of dogs, because I have been bitten by a dog. I don't remember what kind of dog it was. I only remember that when the dog pounced on me, there was no one around me. I cried and asked for my parents, but I didn't get any response. At that time, they were still quarreling at home. They didn't rush until I was sent to the hospital. My mother hugged me and burst into tears. Since then they have rarely quarreled. My mother endured for me, but I was her burden and her bond. In a fragmented family, there is always one side that needs to compromise. And she compromised for me. Later, the divorce was just that she wanted to compromise for herself. She is a mother, but she is also herself. Therefore, when I begged her not to leave, she stubbornly didn't look at me. She is afraid that she will be soft-hearted. 35 From my perspective with my comparison, Guantong is happy. It's like drinking water to cool and warm yourself. But this is Guantong's life, and no one can define it. I gave my body to Guantong and watched her and her mother cry to each other. I watched them gradually begin to say something from their hearts. Mom will tell Guantong that she is her pride. Guantong will also tell her mother what she thinks. I feel that my consciousness often falls into a deep sleep. There is a big difference between Guantong and my personality. She and Li Zhixing rarely communicate much as deskmates. Li Zhixing sometimes looked at her, but he seemed to be looking at me through her face. Guantong has some talent in painting. In the past, she has been running between various makeup classes, and has no opportunity to study systematically. Her grades are not very good, and many things can't be completed by hard work. She told her mother that she wanted to take the art examination and study art. Facing her mother, she lowered her head lostly. I'm too stupid. It's too difficult for me to learn this way. Mom just gently encouraged her. Tong Tong is very good at drawing. Mom supports you. Most of the time, I couldn't perceive the outside world, until Li Zhixing was absent from class again. I took over Guantong's body again. I easily found Li Zhixing on the street where Li's father lay down. The blood on the road has long disappeared. The gray concrete road is dusty, and passers-by are in a hurry. No one remembers that a person has fallen here. He sat on the side of the road, until the dim yellow light of the street lamp lengthened his shadow. I sat beside him and didn't talk to each other. Guantong came back. I shared a body with her, and I always felt tired. Li Zhixing, what are you thinking about? After a long time he opened his mouth. The voice was dry. No one close to me will have a good end, Grandpa, my mother and him. He in Li Zhixing's mouth refers to Li's father. His feelings for Li's father are very complicated. On the one hand, he treats him as an antithesis, but he can't give up the only affection. But when he really died to protect him, this feeling reached its peak. He fell into despair again. Once again, he felt that the misfortune of the people around him was because of himself. Li Zhixing, I always thought I was here to save you, but I was like a bystander, unable to do anything or change anything. I also think I'm useless. I've traveled back in time, but I haven't done anything. He looked up at me, and the corners of his eyes were red. Obviously he had just cried. I looked at him, and looked into his eyes carefully. His pupils were very pale, and under the light they were like glaze. Li Zhixing, you are not a disaster star, you are my lamp. You're leaving, aren't you? He didn't look at me, but I heard the loneliness in his tone. Everyone has their own way to go, Li Zhixing. I will wait for you in the future. End.